My name is Tom Latimer, and I'm pleased to have you join us today for this session on how to conduct a materiality assessment utilizing Social Suite's software. Hopefully this will be a bit more practical than the usual theoretical sessions that we run. For those that are unaware of who Social Suite is, we are an AI-driven software company specializing in helping organizations identify and manage their material sustainability risks. For those that have probably joined previous sessions and webinars, you're aware that these sessions are recorded. We send them out after the session. We also do host them on our website, so feel free to visit socialsuitehq.com. Alternatively, you can visit our YouTube page and always catch up on previous recordings as well. So just a bit of housekeeping before we hand across to our host for the day. You'll notice there is a chat box on the right-hand side. Feel free to pop in any questions and we can address those as we go along. We will also leave a section at the end for Q&A. So yeah, just feel free to pop any questions or write them down and pop them into the box. So to help us with today's session, we're joined by Social Suite's Chief Impact Officer, Dr. Tim Siegenbeek van Heukelom, who's got extensive expertise across not just materiality, but a decade plus in experience across sustainability strategy, reporting, and impact programs across public, private, and social sectors. So without further ado, Tim, I'd like to hand across to yourself.
Excellent. Thanks, Tom, for that introduction. And it's a pleasure to be here today to talk to you about how to conduct a materiality assessment using Social Suite software. So to do that today, we do want to focus on the middle, the solution. So how to efficiently run that materiality assessment using software. But I'll quickly start with the situation. So what is the problem that a lot of companies are actually experiencing in doing that materiality assessment? So I'll spend a few minutes setting the scene, then we'll jump into the solution. And at the end, we'll definitely want to get you going into the platform. So we will offer you a free trial to see how you can use our software to improve your next materiality assessment. So definitely stick around for that. At the end of the webinar, we'll give you a unique link so that you can get that free trial and get going. So first of all, what is the situation right now around materiality assessments? What we see is that to the majority of companies, it is a given. They are doing their materiality assessments, often in different shapes and forms and at different levels of complexity or approach. But generally speaking, you would say about 80% of companies do a materiality assessment. In Australia, we've seen, for instance, the ASX 200 is just over 80% there that do a materiality assessment, with the majority of them also doing some level of stakeholder engagement. Now, what we do find is that there are a lot of challenges associated with doing that materiality assessment. So we see a lot of spreadsheets are being used, which can be quite cumbersome and complex. There's often a high kind of resource intensity there on the team to do the work, to get ready for stakeholder engagement. And that process of working with your stakeholders to get their views and insights often also throws up a number of hurdles. Often also advisors and consultants are brought into the process and they come along then with high costs as well. So what we do see then is that the chief sustainability officer or the manager of sustainability is often wondering, we have an in-house ESG team that should be able to handle our materiality assessment with ease, but actually we rarely do. There's always this sprint throughout the year where we're trying to just throw all those resources and money and the complexity, and everyone is just kind of dreading this. It should be a lot easier. Now, that's where we think that with our dedicated technology, you can alleviate that burden. You can streamline the whole effort and really save on time and cost. Now, that solution is what we want to talk to you about today and show you how you can do that. So to run that efficient materiality assessment, we have two software solutions, of which we're going to focus on the left one today, which we call our base materiality software. And we've really designed that to help you in particular about streamlining your stakeholder engagement. Now, there's also a more advanced materiality software solution that we have that's really best practice and compliant with the CSRD in Europe, or also with the requirements of GRI and IFRS ISSB. If you want to do that type of double materiality assessment, it does a lot more. It gets you down to that IRO level, impact, risk, and opportunities. But today we want to focus on our base materiality software to really show you how you can streamline some of those stakeholder engagement efforts. We also have a Social Suite Academy, in which we have our product user guides, documentation, and also some e-learning courses about the foundations of materiality, advanced materiality, and a lot more coming quite soon. So for today's purposes, what we'd like to do is to introduce you to a fictional company. We've called this company EcoCycle Solutions, and it is an Australian integrated waste management and resource recovery company. So we've created this company to give you an idea of how to actually run that materiality assessment using some actual data of a company that we've made up, so you can see what their considerations are and how that works. So for this company, we've also created a little bit of background, because we do see most companies that are doing materiality assessments are not doing it for the first time. They have done something in the past, or they do have relevant information. That doesn't mean that if you've never done anything related to materiality or working out what's important from a sustainability point of view for your company, you can't use the software. Definitely, there's a lot of guidance, and we can really guide you through that process. But we do see that the majority of companies have done something. So what do we already know about EcoCycle Solutions, or ECS in this case? Well, they've done a back of the envelope materiality assessment in 2021. So I really kind of captain's call, these are our important topics. They reused that a year later. And then in 2023, they said, well, we need to be a bit more formalized and standardized about this. So let's get an advisor and let them help us do a GRI-aligned impact materiality assessment. They reused that outcome in 2024 as well. And then now up to that point in 2025 where they say, we want to run a double materiality assessment. So still using that angle from GRI to look at impacts, but we also want to add to that the ISSB, and we'll use for that the SASB framework to look at our risks and opportunities. In doing so, we want to also look at what our competitors are doing. So we're getting Social Suite to run us an AI-driven peer benchmarking exercise, which will give us a competitive analysis of our top 10 competitors in our industry. What are they doing around materiality, and what can we learn from that? We recently have done a full value chain mapping exercise as part of our AASB S2 climate reporting. So we have a pretty good grip on our value chain, which is important to understand across that full value chain, upstream, your own operations, and downstream, which topics and which stakeholder groups could be material or are at least relevant. ECS has a sustainability committee, and they're particularly interested to learn the stakeholder insights of two large shareholders, of their investors and customers. And there's an ESG lead who's actually going to run this effort, do the materiality assessment, and they've already started to draft a stakeholder map. Who are the key stakeholders based on what we've done previously, based on the requirements from our sustainability committee, and within the business, what are the key kind of departments can tell me about their key stakeholders. So this is a little bit of that background. Based on that, they've decided, the ESG lead, that they're going to run 4 surveys this year. 2 focused internally, one on the impact angle on their employees, the other one focused on risks and opportunities, addressing board management and key shareholders. And then from an external perspective, one survey will also focus on impacts and asking customers, value chain workers, and nature as a silent stakeholder for their views. And the other one is focused on risks and opportunities, addressing investors, regulators, and local authorities. In addition to that, they do want to run a couple of interviews to really go a little bit deeper and get a more tailored, specific view on particular topics. Now, ideally, they do want to kind of do that post-survey to get some sense from the surveys where we might want to get the key stakeholders to interview. But the sustainability committee has said, we have a new CEO who's been here for 7 months, so we definitely want to interview them and get their views captured in more of that deep dive in an interview. I mentioned nature earlier as a stakeholder group. Now, that can be hard to engage with nature, because how do you do that? It's a silent stakeholder that can't speak up for themselves. But for that, we can do some additional research, look at reports, white papers, and data. But also we can go out to subject matter experts and ask them as a proxy what their views are on particular impacts on nature. Now, we've set the scene now. We know what our existing information is. We know what our objectives and aims are. We have a little bit of an idea around the surveys, the interviews, the research that need to be done. And with that, we can actually jump over to our platform. And in the platform, what we can then do is actually run that stakeholder engagement exercise. So I'm bringing that up now. We're now jumping over to our platform. And where we land first is on our home screen. This is really meant to help you, give you an overview of where you are in the process. So in this case, we see that ECS is halfway through their stakeholder engagement. They've selected topics, they've identified stakeholders, and they're now working on their interviews, surveys, and research. So let's run through each of these components over the next 10-15 minutes to show you how that is being set up and where they are in the process, and see if we can do some preliminary analysis and scoring based on the existing data that they've collected. What I addressed is that the company comes into this materiality assessment with some existing data. So to capture that, we're first going to go to research on the data inputs. And what we see here is that indeed some of that information I flagged just earlier has been put in here as a research task. So what we can do in a platform is when we start out, so we can create a new research task and give it a name and some details. We can say what it relates to the value chain, or for instance, to our topic shortlist, assign it to a person and a date. So we can create different tasks and then have particular people in the team or yourself populate that. So for instance, we noticed that they've done a materiality assessment in 2021. So let's look in there and we see that, yes, that was a little bit of a captain's call. Let's pick 6 topics that we believe are important, but there wasn't any stakeholder engagement. But what we can do in here is just capture those topics, get all the information that we might have on our shared drive or somewhere floating around in a business, bring that into this platform to have a centralized place where we can capture that information. Likewise, in 23, we did a more extensive one. The ESG lead thought, let's put that information in here as well. So we now have 14 topics that were aligned with GRI, impact materiality, so we're capturing that information in here. Another data point is that the sustainability lead went to the International Waste Congress 2024. Now, in there were a lot of discussions about particular important topics that are significant to the waste industry, and one that stood out was circular economy. So we're capturing a little bit of a highlight here, a link to the particular outcomes of the Waste Congress. So it's about getting information into the platform that can help you with various components. In this case, we see we're working on our topic shortlist. Another key component is the peer analysis or competitive analysis. So as I mentioned, Social Suite has looked at the top 10 Australian waste or recycling companies that are direct peers, competitors of EcoCycle, and captured the most kind of important, significant material topics of these companies and their sustainability reports where they're flagged in. So all that information is captured in here. So with that, the ESG lead now has everything in one place and is an easy point to just kind of work out what are those topics that are actually relevant to ECS in this materiality assessment. Now, there is some more information. They've already started working on a stakeholder mapping as well, which is captured here, just in spreadsheet for those particular 4 surveys that they will be doing. One for employees. We see the other 3 in here as well. So all that information is in here. That also later helps when you do this again next year to have everything in one place. You're no longer looking around shared drives, or if you've staff turnover, what did we do? How did we do it? Where's all that information? Everything is centrally stored. And finally, the value chain map as well, a very simplified view of that, but it does help you to have a good grip on what are activities, what are the related stakeholders and topics to those activities. So who do we need to engage on what topics? Now, in this research module, you can capture a lot of information there, and it really helps you to kind of set up your materiality assessment based on actual data that you have or that you are collecting, and quite easily access that. Now, the first component after this is often where companies start is setting up their topic list. So what are, out of the whole realm of all the sustainability and ESG topics you can think of, what are actually relevant topics to the company? When we go here first, we're looking at a blank page because we do need to map the topics that we want to use. So if we go to topic mapping on the top right there, we see the first thing we'll need to choose is what are some of the key standards and frameworks that we want to use. In this case, we've decided we're using GRI for impact materiality, selected that, and SASB for financial materiality, risks and opportunities. And within SASB, which is focused on industry standards, we've selected waste management. If we then go to the next step, which is refine topic list, what we then get to do is look at those particular standards we've selected on the left. So we see SASB coming up and we see GRI, and select the subtopics that we do want to use. So this is already done here. If you wonder, like, how do I know which topic to select? Well, that is going back to what did you know from previous years? So what was material in previous years? What are your peers and competitors doing? So looking at that, what is your industry telling you at an industry white paper, research, conferences? So it's really looking what is relevant to your business. The materiality assessment itself will be coming later, but this is the key topics that you want to engage your stakeholders on. But there might be topics that are not covered in the key standards we've selected here. That might be coming from other standards or just are more entity-specific topics. So we see that on the right-hand side, the user-created topics, and it's as simple as just creating a new topic, naming it, putting in if it's an E, an S, or a G, and what the definition is that you want to use for that topic. So in that way, we can set up all the topics in this topic module. Once we've done that, we can lock the topic list in, and then we have all our topics selected. Now, we're not going to use all the topics in each survey, but we'll look at that in a moment. We go back to our main screen where we see our topic selection. We now see all those topics under the environment, social, and governance pillars, the standards they're coming from, or if we created those topics ourselves. So you have a good overview of all the topics that you've put on your topic shortlist. From here, what we often see people go then to setting up their surveys. So let's go on the left to survey. And in the surveys, we see indeed those 4 surveys that we flagged earlier that the ESG lead wants to run. We see that there's a number of them that are already active. We see that there's stakeholders added, and we see that there's been responses. And we see there's one that is still at 0, that still needs to be set up and actually activated and sent out to stakeholders. So we're going to start with that one, but after that, once we've kind of gone through that, we'll look at a completed survey to give you a sense of what that looks like. So in this case, we're going to look at the external impacts. And the external impacts are really that we are going to focus on customers, value chain workers, and nature. Within this survey, the first tab that we look at is our topics. You see all the topics that you do set up in the topic module in here. But what you can do now is select the topics that are actually relevant to this particular survey. So if we think about impacts we're having, and we think about the external stakeholder groups that we're actually going to engage with, what do we want to ask them? What are the topics that are relevant to them and that they're competent to ask about? So there will be some topics here that are not so much impact focused, but more on the risk and opportunity side, often more coming from SASB. So what we've done here is select some of those topics that we do want to ask questions about. And in this case, you see them selected here. Now, of course, you can add more topics in there, but you're always trying to keep in mind as well, if you complete a survey and you get questions about 40 topics, how likely are you to just make it to the end? So you want to, with surveys, try to be targeted, ask about topics that your stakeholders are competent and interested in to answer about. So less is more often. It's about quality over quantity. And you can do any number of surveys as well. It's really about how you want to set that up. So with the topics selected in here, we can look at our survey setup. And in there, we can do a number of things. On the right-hand side, we'll see what the mobile view is of the survey. People bring it up on their mobile device. On the right as well, we can see a desktop review if we want to have a look at. And we can customize all of these things. Your logo, the introduction text and video. You can use what we provide by default or customize that any way you like. Really important is to look at the topic rating and questions, because in here, we will actually select what we call the dimensions. And the dimensions you can choose from are significance, impact, risk, and opportunity. And in this case, what we want to focus on is impacts. So what you see, if I selected enable impact score, and that gives me this question here for each of the topics I'm presenting my stakeholder. So let's assume that the sample topic name here would be biodiversity. I'm asking, in this case, the stakeholder, rate the impact that the organization has on the world in relation to biodiversity. And that could be positive or negative impacts. And that could be low with a 1 or high with a 5, a major impact. Or it could be, from a stakeholder perspective, not applicable. And then we do always ask, do you have any comments, feedback, or thoughts about this particular topic? And that is where you capture more of that qualitative information. So we can do that setup in here. After that, we can also add in any custom questions. And we do find it's at a minimum really useful to just put a general question in there for further feedback, comments, or missing topics. So with all that setup done, we can also look at setting up some email templates. If you use the platform to send out an invitation for your stakeholder, you can look at what that looks like here and make any changes to that email invitation as required. Then we get to our stakeholder setup here. So what are the stakeholders you're going to engage? Right now, this is pretty empty. We're working with stakeholder groups. So we see one group that's called self-sign-up, and we'll look at that in a moment. But what you can do here is create your own stakeholder groups, and then in each group manually add your stakeholders one by one, or more efficiently, we can just import stakeholders to a spreadsheet, a CSV file. So that is what we'll do in this instance. We've prepared that file already, and once we kind of import that in here, it will load in all the stakeholders. And as we see here, we have those key groups in here, our customers, we see them loaded in, we see our value chain workers, and we see nature as well. And what I flagged with nature is these are subject matter experts that can, on particular areas of expertise, provide insights on what impact the business has on nature. So with the stakeholders loaded in here, with our topics and setup done, if we're happy with all this, we can go live with the survey. The key step to do then is to activate the survey. And that means once I've done that, I cannot change the topics anymore or the survey setup. So this is the point where you say, we're good to go with our survey. All we've done now is activating the survey. The next step would be to actually sending your stakeholders an invitation to complete that survey, which can be done at a top level, which we see at the top right. We can send all our stakeholders in this survey an email at once. We can do it at the group level. So if we just want to engage our customers first, or we can individually, under email action, send stakeholders an individual email. So we see various scenarios where people decide to do it all at once or engage with particular groups or individuals first before doing others. In this case, what we'll do is we'll just send out the emails. We'll get to choose what email template we want to use. We can have a look at what that email would look like. And then if we're happy with that, we can send those email out to our stakeholders. And once that then is done, once the platform sends out those emails, you see the status for each stakeholder change to sent. That means the email invitation has been sent. So they'll get that into their inbox and they can then start clicking the link and filling out that survey. Another way of engaging your stakeholders is at the top with our self-sign-up link. Now, you might not want to use our platform to send out the emails, but do want people to, of course, go in and complete that survey. You can use this unique link and use your own email platform to send out your own custom emails. So we do see companies use that have particular firewalls or ITs or other security systems that they prefer to use their own email, or just in terms of recognition, where they believe that if they send it out themselves or have particular stakeholders in the business do that engagement and use this link, then they might get a better response rate. Some companies do both. They first send out the link to the platform and later follow up with a self-sign-up survey. Now, if that is being used, then people will end up in our self-sign-up group unless their email matches what is already in the system, and they'll end up in the right group. So there's various ways to engage your stakeholders using our platform. Now, what we can do then as well is we can look at the progress tab to see where we are in terms of the process that we've made. We see stakeholders been loaded, emails are sent, emails are being opened, and then the next steps would be the completion. And at the bottom, we see for our particular stakeholder groups, how many stakeholders have received the survey, how many submissions, the response rate. So we can keep a close eye on this and do some targeted follow-up as required. If I go back then to our stakeholders, you may want to look at what does actually a survey look like for one of our stakeholders. So I'll jump over to this tab here and we'll look at what that looks like. This is the introduction screen here where stakeholders get that kind of quick overview and a video if they want to watch that about how to complete the survey. If I click continue, then you get served up with your first topic. On the right-hand side, a definition that you can edit in the platform before you go out in the topic module, so you can customize that all the way to make it as relevant to your stakeholders and to your business as possible. And then, like I said, you can then, as a stakeholder, rate the impact, provide any feedback, and then go to the next topic. So let's jump out of this particular survey, and then let's look at one of the surveys here that's already been closed. So this was the survey for internal stakeholders on impacts, and we actually engaged with our employees here. So what we see here is we have that group of employees in here, and we see quite a few people have indeed submitted the survey, and for some of them who did not complete the survey, we see their status is closed. So the survey is now closed. They can no longer submit inputs to the survey. The amount of time you leave the survey open is really up to you. We see companies do it for a week and do a reminder, and then another week, whereas others stretch it out a bit longer to allow for more people to respond to the survey. Now, throughout the process of getting the responses in the results tab here, we can actually see for this particular survey what the responses are. So we can see what topics, scores, which are cumulative, all added up. So you see that in this case, waste is the number one topic that is on the minds of employees. And you see those scores there. Now, this is, of course, only for this particular survey, and everything will be added together when we go to the analysis, and we'll look at that in a moment. We're also capturing those qualitative responses, and we do see here that, yes, your employees have actually, for those topics, there have been people providing more in-depth responses. And this is quite useful as well if you do want to follow up on with particular stakeholders to do interviews or otherwise, or understand when people say that waste is important. You can look at that. What are their comments there? So that is quite an important component as well to take into consideration. Now we'll jump back here, and we see that we're throughout that process now of getting those surveys completed, but the company is also doing interviews as we flagged. We'll do 5 interviews. What we see is they've completed 2 interviews. So they've done one with a customer and one with the CEO. So if we look at that in the platform, we can add the relevant on the top left attendees to the interview. Sometimes you might have a focus group or a workshop where you have multiple people. We can create an agenda, and then we can log in what are the questions and also link the topics to that and provide on what dimensions the stakeholders provided scores. So sometimes that is that they really kind of say, oh, this is a top of the list topic. In this case, we're using a 0 to 10 a rating scale here. So all this then feeds back into the analysis. And if we look at our CEO, the same thing. They provided some insights, and on a lot of the topics they provided how important it is to them. So all those things have been captured in here. So there's some qualitative and quantitative information in here. Now, more interviews will be conducted, more surveys will be conducted, and that will then ultimately feed into, at the bottom, the analysis and scoring. So what we can do here is see all the data you're collecting from your stakeholders. We see here the surveys. Now we see 3 of them in here because they are at the moment active. We see 2 of them are completed. 1 is in progress at the moment. We see those 2 interviews in here as well that have been completed. And any data set that's completed, we can use in our analysis. So we don't have to wait to the very end of our stakeholder engagement. The moment one data set is completed, we can already start generate an analysis just to see what we can learn and where things are at. Of course, the most value you get at the end when all the data is collected, but let's now see what some of the data that we've collected can tell us. So we're going to weigh the survey at 100%, have risk and opportunity contribute to our financial materiality. We'll do for the impacts, we'll do 100% as well. And in this case, impact will contribute to impact materiality. For our customer, we'll, let's say, weigh that at 75%. We'll use significance in this case for both and risk for financial materiality. And in terms of our CEO, we'll use that at 100% and say that their significant score contributes to both sides, impact and financial materiality. Now we can leave out some of the data sets as well. If we just want to look at the 2 interviews against each other or the 2 surveys, you can really keep doing this. You can generate an analysis, reset, generate to really get a feel for where things are heading. So let me click on generate analysis now, and then let's review the topics. So this is now based on those 4 data sets and based on the weighting we've given it, where things stand. So what we see is the topics with their source, the impact materiality score, and we've normalized everything back to a 1 to 100 scoring system. So the 1 to 5s and the 1 to 10s, everything is now on that 1 to 100. And we see some of the scores having a color, and that relates back to our thresholds that we can set. We can decide where the threshold is for our business that a topic is material from an impact point of view or from a financial point of view. That can be the same as we've done here, 50 to 100 is the threshold, but we can also make that different for impact and financial materiality. And it's as simple as clicking edit, and you can also add in additional ranges. So you might have not material, material, and highly material, or high priority. So you can set up different threshold ranges. Now, if I go back to the analysis and scoring and the review topics again, we now see that those colors match that setup of the thresholds. We see anything above 50 will be colored, and otherwise it will be gray. Now, that is how we want to kind of use our assignment of how we kind of look at topics from a materiality point of view. We can auto assign based on the thresholds, and what we see is indeed the topics that are colored are now set as material. But what we also can do sometimes is say, well, we do believe energy should actually be material and include that. So you can play around with some of those settings there. A key thing to keep in mind is this is only your stakeholder engagement data. This might not be your final materiality determination. Often we see companies do this exercise, take those results, and then internally do a validation session with either the sustainability committee or cross-functional team, leadership. There will be key stakeholders that will look at what have our stakeholders actually told us and then do that final materiality determination. So what your stakeholders tell you is really important, but it's not automatically set in stone that what they tell you is material or not. So keep that in mind. Now, once I log in my topic assignment here, I can go back to our analysis and scoring module, and I now see that under item 3, we have some configurable outputs. So I can add a chart if I like, a materiality matrix to this. I can look at that and I see, there's some interesting kind of movement here. Now we're in the middle of doing this, so a lot of the topics will still move various ways. I expect a lot of topics that are sitting on the axis itself have not received the score yet because we still have surveys outstanding that are not into the analysis at the moment. So this will change. You can also change the thresholds, and you'll see those colored quadrants then kind of move out or move in. So this gives you a snapshot of where things stand at the moment. With that as well, we can also do a table, topic score table, for instance, where we can have a look at those key topics and their scores. What we often see companies do at the end is to run this table and export it into a spreadsheet and then get that over for their validation session, maybe do some custom analysis on it. Or what they often do is get it to their, when everything is said and done, get it to their brand and graphic design department, where they'll actually use the data points to run and set up a materiality matrix that is aligned with the brand colors and themes of the sustainability report. So out of the platform, you can get a lot of configurable outputs that you can then use in your sustainability reporting. And what that looks like will be the next component. So I want to jump back now. I'll stop sharing and jump back to our session here and bring up where we left off. And this is a good example here, where we see that one of our customers last year that we work with, Tabcorp, they've gone through that whole process. They're doing various kind of sessions and various stakeholder engagement throughout the year, collected all that information and brought all that together in their sustainability report for 2024. As you see, this definitely looks a little similar to what we just saw into our platform. So you see how that materiality assessment then ultimately can end up in your sustainability report. We see some companies do more of a separate materiality report as well. There's various ways you can use the data, and we can definitely guide and help you with that, as well as in our Social Suite Academy. You can find more information about the foundations of materiality and how to use that information that you're generating in our platform. Now, with that, then you might get ready to actually do the work yourself. So if you're ready and want to give this a go, we can give you a free trial to jump into our platform and see how that works for you. You can use our base materiality software for 14 days just to getting the information in you already have, setting up surveys, running interviews, just getting a feel for it. With that, you also get access to our Social Suite Academy, where you can, in more detail, run through our platform and get an idea of how that works. So with that as well, I do want to invite you to ask us any questions at this point in time. And I'll see Tom is coming back onto stage as well. What I'll do is, in the chat, I'm sharing a link now, and that link will get you to a specific page where you can request a 14-day free trial of our software so that you can have a go yourself. Tom, over to you and see if there's any questions that have come in.
Thanks, Tim. It was a great session. As Tim mentioned, if anyone's got any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat box. Just while people might be thinking of questions to ask, as mentioned at the start of the webinar, we will send across the recording. We'll also send the free trial link as well for you to dive in and have a play around. But if anyone's got any questions, whether you want to put it in the chat box or feel free to reach out to us afterwards, you certainly can do. We'll leave our details there for you to reach out. But if there isn't any questions, then we just like to...
I got a direct message here come in asking if you already have a ESG advisor, can you still use this? I think that's a pretty good question. We do see that a lot of sustainability advisors and consultants that work with companies indeed use this as well, our platform, to just kind of speed up the work that they're doing and getting everything in one place. So that is definitely something that we've seen quite a lot, that there already might be some support you're receiving, that this could still be a good way to automate some of the work your advisor is doing at the moment.
Yeah, it's a good point. Really good question as well. Thanks, Alexandra. If no other questions, then we'll leave it there. Thank you everyone for the time, and hope you enjoy the rest of the day. And as we said, we'll follow up with a follow-up email. Thanks everyone.